Can literary adaptations help rebuild the Ghanaian film industry? We'll be delving into an article that stresses on such a possibility, and we'll be taking a look as to whether that can indeed help the industry, or perhaps we have a different view on it altogether. And also moving on from adaptations to the X-Men property, Tim Miller, director of Deadpool, has tendered his bid into wanting actually to direct an X-Men movie. Will Kevin Feige go ahead and give him that opportunity? Well, we'll be delving into that story as well, all here on the Film Mandate right here on YouTube. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions both from the African front and the international scene. Thank you so much for joining me for this very episode 51. Thank you so much for being with me for how far we have come on this journey. And delving right into the very first story. Rebuilding Ghana's film industry. And this is a story that was published on the Modern Ghana website. And I thought it brought about quite an interesting angle to the possibility of helping build a Ghana film industry. Over the years, months, weeks, there has always been the issue or talk of the Ghanaian film industry being weak, even some to the extent of saying it's dead. Well, this writer is also giving his opinion as to how we can bolster a strong, industry through filmmaking in terms of storytelling. So let's take this article from Joshua Anumu Agbenu, who is a researcher and has tendered his opinion in this article. So I read, our Ghanaian film industry must consider adaptations as part of its development strategy. Close to a decade, there have been unbearable cries about a collapse in the film industry's operations and an evident decline in patronage from citizens. While economic or financial factors may serve as the basic causatives of this challenge, it is also important to identify the units of the bigger problem and attend to them one after the other. Beyond financial shortcomings, there are structural and operational deficiencies. We may be producing boring stories that spark no interest from the audiences. It's a competitive market. What would motivate Owusu Danso in Osu to skip a British or American movie to watch one produced by our local industry? Excellence in content production. That is the answer. That is where our question marks fly high. We currently have a film market where everyone is a writer, director, and a producer. Actors and actresses spend 2 to 3 years under an experienced producer, make some notes from entertainment and ambassadorial deals, and quickly exit the production house to also become producers of their own elsewhere. You may call it a shift in good season, but what results do we see from these? Breaks, cleavages, zero collaborations, rushed stories, poor plots, inefficiencies, and 1,000 excesses, resulting in movies that see only the walls and screens of a cinema and die after a week's hype. Writing is a gift. It is a skill one mastered over time. It even takes a writer with a wide span of knowledge across pure African and English literature, cultural studies, and media communication to produce a story that meets the artistic demands of all audiences. The likes of Senior Kwao Ansa, Shirley Frimpong Manson, Ivan Kwashiga, Peter Sedufia, Leila Jansi, Akosua Ejiani, Esiedu, Pascal Aka, and Kofi Asamoah pass as excellent examples of such storytellers. The full stop, however, does not end there. The growing decline in patronage of Ghanaian film products demands immediate adoptions of adaptations. There are excellent prose works from names like Ama Ata Edu, Lawrence Damani, Peggy Opon, Ayikwe Ama, Christine Botre, Kwe Kwote, Caleb Azuma Nelson, Ruby Yaya Goka, Ya JC, and many others we could consider as contents for films on our screens. These are writers who have spent years developing creative literature for the arts industry. Adaptations are the deal now. Lots of heavily viewed European, Nigerian, and South African films on the almighty Netflix streaming platform are productions from already existing novels. Copyright compliance settlements could be initiated for involved partners to all benefit. It may be quite a process, but it helps eventually. It helps eventually. So this is the article written by researcher Joshua Anumu Agbenu, and it is indeed uh, quite a revelation as to some of the things he raised in this article. For the film enthusiast who watches a lot of foreign or European films from this part of the world, we have noticed with keen interest the number of films that were adapted from different medium aside just the film sequels or adaptations of films themselves or remakes of films, so to speak. A number of them were adapted from the novels, and particularly in the last 2 decades, to be specific, comic book film adaptations or comic book movies. And all these have been adapted from literary materials into the medium of film. And one that I've worked particularly well in terms of novel, just as the writer Joshua was saying, is the Harry Potter franchise, and then we move on to even the the Harry Potter franchise, and I'm even missing one, the Hobbits, having the Hobbits, and then the Lord of the Rings franchises. These are films that were adapted from novels onto the silver screen, and it did particularly well. And yes, same can also thrive well in this part of our world when it is properly adapted. And the issue, I think, generally for the Ghanaian film industry and perhaps other African industry may say same for their countries, is the issue of solid writers, because it may translate well on in terms of the medium of novel, but the question is that can it translate well from the novel to the screen, and that solely depends on the expertise of the scriptwriter adapting such screenplays. And one thing we should note is that the medium of film, there is what we call the cinematic time. So adapting a novel into a screenplay to be shot into a movie would have to consider the aspect of cinematic time. Then there is the issue of cinematic time has to do with the entire story being compressed into perhaps the 1 hour or 2 hour time duration to make logical sense and to ensure that the film is properly engaging with regards to sound, visual, and pacing. So, what may translate or work well in the novel may not necessarily work well on screen, and therefore, the reason for adaptation, meaning that an adaptation from a book to or a novel to screen may sometimes alter the way a film is or a novel is or the structure of how a novel is. But core to it would be to stay true to the story, even though a creative person, be it a director or writer, may take creative liberties to make sure that it works well on screen. And so perhaps the best way a screenwriter can help make the adaptation or the novel work best on screen is to find the perfect balance, and by leveraging on the strength of both the medium of the novel and the medium of the film, by ensuring that it works well so much in the storytelling process. So yes, This indeed is a laudable idea, but then that would depend on the dexterity of the filmmaker or writer adapting the screenplay from a novel to the screen. So adapting, sorry, the novel from the book into the screen. So that is where indeed is the major problem. Do we have solid script writers who are not just churning their own thoughtful stories, I mean, imaginary stories that they've created or fictional stories that they've created, but having the ability to adapt novels into movies? Those are the questions that ought to be asked. I remember some time back, I did read an article, and the veteran actor David Donto said that we lack strong writers. We lack strong writers in this country. And indeed, that shows on our screens. You don't even need any further evidence than the films that are shown on the in the cinemas or on several platforms, and that is the bane we face in the industry. So in as much as this is a laudable idea, the basic thing comes down to how good or how skillful are our writers. There may be, I'm not saying we don't have skillful writers, we have some good writers here in Ghana, no two ways about that. But the question may be either they've not had the opportunity to have their script produced into film, or perhaps in the process of directing that script into a movie, there was a loss in translation where the director perhaps couldn't properly translate or create the story of the pages of the script into a powerful movies. And it happens sometimes. It happens sometimes. So in Europe in particular, novels are a big deal, and novels are making some of the best movies you can possibly think of. And the Harry Potter franchise and the Lord of the Rings franchise aren't just the two movies that are, I mean, have been adapted successfully into movies. You have the comic books franchise like the Marvel, which have made so many, I mean, so many movies out of this comic book materials and made billions of dollars, billions of dollars. You can name the Maze Runner movies, even the Twilight books, and all also boils down to who you are able to cast to be able to interpret the character so well for the lovers of the book to also accept it on screen. And the good thing is that, yes, the advantage you have in adapting a book, if it's properly done, it's able to bring in the audience of, I mean, those who were reading the books, and also tap into a different segment of audience that perhaps may not even have an idea as to the book existing in the first place. So movies has the potential to be able to reach wider audiences that ordinarily those who are not lovers of books, it may not reach to. So, yes, I agree with Joshua on several fronts. The key question we should ask ourselves is that, do we have expert writers who can carefully adapt some of these powerful concepts or content in the novels? We have beautiful African stories from Efokojo Maugbe, whose even stories are being adapted into theater, and it's so wonderful to watch some of these things. And a number of the names that he mentioned, if you read any of their books, you'll be so excited. I mean, you have Marriage of Anna and Suwa, In the Chest of a Woman, The Eggs, I think Peggy Upon the Egg, I've forgotten the title, but there are several books that whose stories are so powerful. Let's not even forget the Anansi folk tales that exist that we read whilst we were kids, and even our grandfathers or grandparents even read when they were kids. All these materials exist for our taking. The question would be, do we have skillful writers to translate it into the screen, and do we have the necessary resources to make sure that the core message of the novels or books are not lost in translation when finally brought onto the silver screens? Those are questions we need to ask ourselves, and I hope this will keep us, you know, keep the dialogue ongoing to perhaps find a place for adaptations for films. I mean, adaptations of the novels into films. And yeah, this story indeed is something perhaps writers, screenwriters particularly need to consider and perhaps collaborate with the novel IP rights holders to the novels to make that a possibility. And I think it will, our screens may also bring in a different, fresh, air to it as we are desiring that the industry works so well. So yeah, thanks to Joshua for a researcher of Modern Ghana. I don't know whether he works with Modern Ghana for bringing up this article. So it is indeed a powerful piece here. So moving on from Ghana to Hollywood, the Marvel Cinematic Universe have successfully gone through a number of phases and a number of saga, from the Infinity Stone saga to the Multiverse saga. Now, the next bigger saga or phase they are going into is the Mutant saga or the Mutant phase, and with possibly the multiverse wrapping up or will be wrapping up in the Avengers Secret Wars. The Mutant Saga is what everybody are looking up to. But fortunately enough, a number of these characters are going to be introduced into the Doomsday, as it was seen in a number of the Marvel announcement through the display of the names of the various actors who have portrayed these characters on the back of a number of the directors' chairs. So Tim Miller was thrown in his cap in wanting to direct an X-Men movie, aside the story that we have already heard that um, Max Max Shackman or so, if I hope I'm getting the name right, the director of Thunderbolts, were wanting to direct the X-Men. He's been tapped to direct the X-Men, the first X-Men movie. So, in an article published in the Hollywood Reporter, written by James Hibberd, it reads that Tim Miller hopes to direct an X-Men movie. It's Marvel's secret weapon. The Deadpool director, is ready to get back into the feature films. So I read, it's been nearly 10 years since Tim Miller stood on the stage at San Diego Comic Con and revealed the first trailer for Deadpool, which had fans begging the filmmakers to play it a second time and kicked off a hugely successful franchise. Now, the director, who has kept busy making two acclaimed adult animated series, Netflix's Love, Death plus Robots, and Prime Video's Secret Level, is ready to return to the superhero arena. While discussing the new season of his Netflix series, the Hollywood Reporter asked Miller about what he would do to help revive the superhero game on this anniversary of Deadpool shaking up the genre. I think that the Marvel has this. I think that Marvel has this secret weapon they haven't been able to unveil yet, which is the whole X-Men universe, which is what got me into comics. Miller said, "The X-Men are my favorite characters. I wrote Marvel boss Kevin Feige, and I'm like, if there was ever anything that you would let me do in the Marvel universe, please, the X-Men would be it." I had an X-Men movie in development at Fox when the merger happened, which would have been awesome. It was based on X-Men 143, which was Home Alone meets Alien, covering his bases a bit. Miller adds, but if DC ever gets around to doing the Authority, that's my favorite comic ever. It's the Justice League if they kill people. I think there's a lot of room left in the genre, a lot of differences to tell. Miller notes that he was a big fan of the recently released Marvel effort Thunderbolts, which received strong reviews though struggled a bit at the box office. I thought Thunderbolts was an excellent film, he says. Florence Pugh was amazing. All the other actors had an amazing job, and the action was good and grounded. Yeah, so that is it. Let me yeah, so the for those who have watched Tim Miller's film Deadpool, Deadpool in itself is an X-Man, or lives within the X-Men or the mutant world. So even though he may not be necessarily part of the X-Men body as a whole, it still exists within the pantheon of the X-Men universe. And he successfully, together with Ran Reynolds, was able to bring to life this story, that particular story. And it's not surprising that he would want to go back and do a movie in that X-Men universe. And it is so because a lot of these film directors have had passionate love for the X-Men or for comic books in general. And a lot of them grew up on the X-Men comic, just as Timila said that he actually grew up on them and loved them so much. And with his background being in visual effects and also an animator, especially with his studio Bless Studios, it is indeed an interesting. Uh, it is something that we would be anticipating to take a look at, especially for those who watched Deadpool and loved it so much. Deadpool was really a breath of fresh air, a kind of comic book superhero that was really different from the host of others that have already existed or come before it. So for Tim Miller wanting to direct the Deadpool movie, I think for most of us, for myself in particular, it's a welcoming idea, and we would hope Kevin Feige will give him the opportunity of a character that best suits his strengths as a filmmaker to get that done. So, and Timila, he is indeed a good film director. He's done a couple of movies and series from short films. He's actually EP'd a lot of productions, and then he directed two of the biggest films that put him on the map as a director was from Deadpool, um, which we've been talking about, and also Terminator, the Dark Fate or so, um, a James Cameron executive produced production, which he directed. Even though critically it was hailed, but it did bomb box office wide to a tune of about $100 million. But regardless, he did a good job with that. Well, it may be debatable for those who may not like the angle with which the story went, but regardless, he did put in his best. And Tim Miller indeed would be an interesting addition or a good addition to the roster of directors who, if given the opportunity, would be helming an X-Men movie. As to what kind of X-Men movie he may helm, we do not know yet. But if ever there was a character with similar sensibilities like Deadpool or maybe even the X-Force whatsoever, I'm sure he will be so glad to take it upon. But I'm sure he doesn't mind if there is any character at all that will be given him. He would indeed leap at that opportunity and get that done. And Temela indeed has vast experience in what's it called visual effects, and that perhaps may be an added advantage if he should come aboard as a director, because the challenge with directing some of these tent poles is the fact that it involves a lot of visual effects works. And if you are a director who doesn't have that skill set or experience in directing films with these visual effect heavy films, it may indeed be a problem. You may tell a story very well, but it may be lost in the if things are not put in order properly. And for him as a director with vast experience, actually with a background, he is a professionally trained visual effects artist and also an illustrator. So with his background in that already, he brings aboard the X-Men franchise a lot of experience that can help make that a possibility. For those who remember, Deadpool's budget was way low, even below, I think, $100 million, if I'm not mistaken, around $45 million. So it was quite a tight budget. And what they were able to achieve with such was amazing. So you can imagine him coming aboard and being able to helm a production of the tune of maybe 100 million or $120 million, what he is likely to do. So he already brings in massive experience from what he has already done in the past, from Deadpool and then Terminator Dark Fate, where he was also, if I'm not mistaken, but he was also the visual effects supervisor on those films to ensure that whatever he realized or he has directed, his vision is realized rightly on screen. And just a number of is it's not a lot of people that have these experiences. Only a few have these experiences. If I'm not mistaken, um, one director that has this kind of background is the director of The Creator, who I think is Gareth Edwards. Yeah, Gareth Edwards directed The Creator at a very low budget, I think, of $90 million or low, and that is in Hollywood terms. Because for those of us in Africa, a $90 million budget would be mind blowing. It would be, I mean, it would be exceptionally beyond what we've ever dreamt of or imagined. But directors like Gareth Edwards were able to do films on such a massive scale with a budget, a visual effects heavy movie with such amounts that it blew people's minds. So for Tim Miller and Gareth Edwards, given such opportunities may be mind blowing. I'm not saying Gareth Edwards is bidding for X-Men movie. I'm just making a comparison of similar actors with similar backgrounds like Tim Miller. So for Gareth Edwards being able to achieve such with the creator, it means that it is very possible for Tim Miller to do same with any X-Men movie or character thrown his way to direct into a movie because he's already proven it with Deadpool. He was actually going to direct Deadpool 2 when there was creative differences between him and Ryan Reynolds and therefore had to drop out. So if given the opportunity, I know for sure that he's going to nail it so solidly, and then we would indeed enjoy it. Besides, he's also a writer as well, so I'm sure he would have a stake in making sure that the story is shaped right for the purposes of what he would want to do. So, well, maybe Kevin Feige should give him a chance to helm this since he's proven it before, and well, we hope that the X-Men will be a better, the X-Men or the Mutant Saga will be a better phase or saga than any of the past Marvel movies, which is possible, but quite a high bar to perhaps overcome. So yeah, these actually sums up my second story for the day. But today being a Monday, I'm not leaving you without going through the films that made it big on the box office stage this past weekend. So, to begin with, we are taking a look at the domestic box office of the North American audience, and that is we're talking about the North America, US, and Canada to be specific. And then these are the top 10 films that made it big over this past weekend. So we have at number one, which was released just this weekend, is Lilo and Stitch, grossing $63 million. Sorry, I mean actually came I think last week or last. I'm not so certain, but pardon me. It grossed $63 million to a total domestic hum of $280 million. So 280 million, $121,482. Also at number two, which has remained at number two from last week, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning made an additional $27.3 million, adding to a total domestic cum of 122,618,108. At number three, which is opening in its first weekend, is or which opened in its first weekend is Karate Kid Legends, making $21 million. Also, number four, dropping from number three, is Final Destination Bloodlines, adding $10.8 million to the total of 111,714 and $62. And number five, in its first weekend, is Bring Her Back, which happens to be an Australian, I think, an Australian horror flick, making a total of 7,081,501. At number Five, moving up, actually at number six, dropping from number five, is Sinners, adding a total of $5,225,000 and making a total domestic box office of $267,087,268, and that is the Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan's flick. At number seven, dropping from number four, is Thunderbolts, adding 4.8 million into a total of 181,858,785 dollars. At number eight, we have Friendship, dropping from number seven, making a total of 2,567,097 dollars this weekend, and making a total of $12,366,816 in total. And number nine, dropping from number six, is The Last Rodeo, which has added $2,145,785 into making a total of $10,752,970. And last but not the least is J Hope Tour, Hope on the Stage in Japan, live viewing, made a total of $939,173. So this is just the first of 10. I'll leave the link in the description below so that you can check out the rest of the lineup that made such monies. So moving on from that, we'll be going on to the international. We're going on to the international box office and then checking the total 10. So in this weekend 2025 worldwide box office, it's not surprising that Mesa 2 still holds the number one spot with $1,898,629,967. Minecraft 2 still occupies the second position with $947,055,168. Lilo and Stitch, which just opened up like 2 weeks ago, has made a total of 610,821,482. At this rate, it looks like Lilo and Stitch is likely to clock a billion, possibly even Minecraft, if they keep the pace going, may be able to inch closer to a billion. As of now, I don't know whether it's possible, but the rate at which Lilo and Stitch has already made $610 million, it's likely that they can make the billion come maybe the fifth week or sixth week. So moving on from there to Captain America Brave New World is occupying the fourth position with $415,101,577. Thunderbolts is still in the runner at number five with $369,558,785. And number six, Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, which dropped 2 weeks ago, has made a total of $335,818,108. And then at number seven, Sinners has made a total of $350,087,268. And number eight, Final Destination, Final Destination Bloodlines has made a total of $229,314,062. And that is really big also for a, a horror film. That is really a very good job done for a horror film. And also Snow White, you have $205,437,846. And last but not the least, on just the top 10, we have Dogman still with the box office total of $144,916,426. So this also sums up the top 10 worldwide box office as I have brought to you today. I hope you indeed enjoyed this session or this episode of the Film Mandate. I'll be coming your way once again tomorrow with another episode, but I would like to thank you so much for joining me for this episode, and we'll have more exciting stories coming up tomorrow. I'll see you soon again. on another episode of the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. See you soon.